I met a man that arrived with his car and asked me for how long have we been praying. Well, and I explained him a bit, and he told me that from time to time he comes over in front of that abortion center because 13 years ago he attended there to abort to her girl. And there was a man there at the time. I don't know what he was doing. We have no idea who might be 30 years ago, but he had a banner and he touched his shoulder and he asked him not to do it. Please don't do it. And in the words of this man, he told me, at that time I was blinded by the demon. And just with that presence of that man, with those words, I realized what I was about to do. And I decided not to do so. And now I'm super happy with my daughter. Oh. And I pass here from time to time trying to find that man to just tell him thank you.
Hello, Nayeli. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Isabel.
Now, I know we've met quite a few times in Spain through your pro-life work there. And so when I heard that you were in England, I thought it would be great to see if you could fit in a visit to the studio. So we're really blessed that you've managed to do that. And thank you again. So as I say, you've been involved in the pro-life work in Spain for quite a long time now. And I think maybe a good place to start, particularly as a lot of our viewers and listeners are people living in the UK. Could you tell us what the situation is in Spain with regards to abortion? Because I know many of us here might not be too familiar with that. When was abortion legalised in Spain?
It was legalised, sadly, in 1985.
Right.
In that moment, it was just for exceptions, as I think every country starts this way. And then in 2010, it was not only decriminalized, but also established as a right. And that meant that the government must ensure free access to abortion.
Right.
And also it was established for specific terms. So that is the law that remains today, though we have received 2 reforms of the abortion law in the last years, one quite recently. Now, underage girls can have an abortion without the consent of their parents. Yeah. There is more access in the healthcare system, and they can freely have an abortion without any justification till the 14th week. They can do it till the 22nd week if there is any kind of health issue, and up to the 25th week if it's what they say euphemistically incompatible with life. But sadly, during these years we have bumped into different women that have an abortion up to 25 weeks, for example, without any justification or health issue.
Right. And how many abortions would there be on average a year? Any ideas in Spain?
For surgical abortions, up to 100,000 of abortions every year. Since 1985, we have reached the 2,700,000 more or less. But this is just referring to surgical abortions. We know the chemical abortion, the pill ones, are more, but we have no way to measure them because
they're not recorded at all?
No. Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. So no record of how many abortions are chemically induced. And I know in our case in the UK, that's 80 to 90% of our abortions. So I dread to think how many Spanish babies are being aborted chemically there. So I know you're heavily involved in the pro-life movement then, Nayeli. What got you involved in tackling this issue? Is it something that you've always had a passion for? Or?
Not really. There was a moment in my life when I have finished university, when I had a stable job and all the things that the world says you must have to be happy, where I realized my life was hoping for something more. Even though I already knew God, thankfully, my life was very poor in that way because I was not used to giving my life to others. but just looking for the best things to have, as I think most of the people do. So at that point, I started to look for something else in the different apostolates of the Church, of the Catholic Church, or volunteerings. And at the end, I bumped into the pro-life battle, first as sidewalk counselor, where for me it was a shocking experience because up to that point, I thought naively that abortion was the exception in general, and that was more or less just practicing in women that have been raped or teenage moms. And suddenly I faced a reality that I think is cruel for all women in general. By talking to them, I realized that many times women have an abortion because her boyfriend are pushing them towards that, or because of economical issues, and that is not a matter of an exception, but I could see in an hour 20 women having an abortion in just 1 hour. So for me that was really shocking. It appealed to me directly as a woman and as a Christian, and I realized I couldn't ignore that reality. So I was there for 1 year and a half. I learned a lot, and after the time I received a video of a promotional video of 40 Days for Life, claiming that since the existence of this movement, they have been closed up to 100 abortion centers, which for me was like recovering hope somehow, because I was really passionate into sidewalk counseling, but I had ended up in a bit of pessimism because, well, you can save one mom and that's wonderful, but then other 10 escape from you because they don't want to hear you. So even though I was not especially into prayer at that time, for me it made total sense to understand that this is a battle that only God can win. And that was the missing part that I found in this pro-life battle. In Spain at that moment, there was not many pro-life organizations that claimed themselves religious or spiritual at all. The pro-life movement in Spain, except one exception, have always been non-religious.
Right, yeah. I think that's quite common with a lot of pro-life organisations. They can sometimes look at things just from a secular perspective, which we do need to look at, but like you're saying, it is very much a spiritual issue. And just touching on the particular work that you're now involved with, and that's 40 Days for Life, how has that affected things in Spain? I mean, has 40 Days for Life grown since it started there, and how many campaigns have you got going?
Yes, absolutely. I started 5 years ago, and at the beginning I was the leader of Madrid. At that time there were other 3 small cities with this campaign, but I've never heard of 40 Days before. When we brought it to Madrid, it was a massive success because it's a bigger city and it had a huge impact in the media. And from then it started year by year to expand. Today we have, thanks God, 30 campaigns across Spain. That is something wonderful. It's a miracle because when we started, everybody, even priests, even pro-lifers, used to tell us, well, you know what, this will never succeed in Spain because this is too American. They used to say, we don't like praying in the streets. So it's a miracle, and we feel really blessed because of that. Not only the expansion of 40 Days have been massive, now each campaign we usually have up to 15,000 volunteers in total, and 15,000 hours of prayer, which it means a lot. No, it means a lot.
That's beautiful, and I know I have to say I did this before we started recording because I don't want anyone to think that my maths is that good. But I was looking at the amount of abortions that you said happen surgically, about 100,000 abortions, and if we look at that figure, and we look at how many abortions would be happening through the 40 Days campaign, that would be around sort of the 12,000 figure if we're looking at those abortions. That means that if there's 15,000 hours of prayer, that each baby that is surgically aborted through the 40 Days for Life campaign has an hour of prayer dedicated to them. And I think, just for me, looking at it in such a personal way, it reminds me of the beauty of that prayer side of the campaign, that every baby, and obviously not just the baby, but the mum who's going through that, the father that's affected, and all those around that, whether that's healthcare workers or family members, there's an hour of prayer at least dedicated to that one child and their family. And that makes it quite personal, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know that. Also, I have seen a transformation in the pro-life movement and in society in general, because 5 years ago, I already was in the pro-life movement, but I used to hear from everybody, well, you know what, abortion, nobody cares about abortion. It's a lost battle already. Now we have to focus in euthanasia, that it's another battle that we have currently in Spain. And now I remember clearly every time we have a campaign, we have more or less 5 newspapers against us, more or less, publishing something against us. And I remember one of them that is kind of mainstream, everybody reads that newspaper, saying what in the title, why the abortion battle is not won anymore.
Oh, praise God. Yes. So it's given new life then to the pro-life movement, and not just in Spain. That's certainly echoed here in the UK, I think, with 40 Days for Life. And as you've just touched on, Nayeli, that the 40 Days for Life campaign that you particularly are very heavily involved in is very much a spiritual campaign as well as being practical. Now, I know you've said before that this is something that's particularly attracted you, and I think I remember you saying in an interview somewhere something along the lines that to do penance for abortion is to accompany Jesus on the cross. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit and say what you were really getting at with that statement?
We know, first of all, that abortion is a spiritual battle because it touches directly the human heart. So even if I have the best arguments ever, I know I will never convince a woman to don't have an abortion, basically because it requires a change of her heart. And we today live in a society that is too used to get rid of things or of people that are not convenient. And abortion is rooted on that society. So actually, addressing abortion from the spiritual battle is the most efficient way to do, yes, because it goes directly to the root. And I have seen that along our campaigns many times, because the cities and even the leaders are transformed in every campaign. Even for me, has been a path of transformation in my relationship with Christ. And I have seen that also in the leaders. Me, right now, as a national leader, one of my roles is to accompany the different local leaders also in the spiritual battle that they face. Every time a new city starts, usually everything starts to go wrong for that potential leader. So, and I understand it's because I have faced that too, especially in the first years. You suddenly think everything is going wrong, that God has left you alone from many fronts, from the professional or maybe from the family and so on. So we are pretty aware that Satan is always there, going against us, especially against the leader. And for that reason, it's key to make conscious every volunteer that goes there to pray, that it's important to be in grace, for example, or to have a regular prayer life. And in my case, as I have said, I was not a special fan of prayer, let's say, or I didn't trust much in prayer before 40 days. And now God has taught me to trust so much in Him. Of course, I still have my challenges and so on, but I'm not at all the same girl that started, not at all. And yes, we have seen also yes, how the spiritual battle manifests sometimes in the wounds of some people. And the fact that 40 days addresses all the pillars that supports abortion, because at the end, yes, the protagonist is the woman that is having an abortion, but it touches so many pillars, the abortionists that work there, the neighbors that are passive against this crime, so many of them, and we see how each campaign shakes them all.
And are there any particular stories that have maybe touched you, any kind of personal encounters when getting involved in the 40 days?
Many. To be honest, directly only one. But I have seen, for example, many testimonies of abortionists that we might think sometimes that, I don't know, well, we must care about the saving of the soul of these people. Some of them are not fully aware of what they are doing, but some are. And we really have to pray for them because they are also sons of God. I have seen that we know of 3 abortionists that have renounced to their job. One of them, for example, was the sister. She was a cleaner in the abortion center, and she was the sister of a volunteer of us. And the sister was really worried for her. We have been praying, and finally, this girl decided to renounce to her job. We have also this testimony of another nurse that she said, well, after, I don't remember how many years she has been working there, but like 20, like all her life working as a nurse there. And she said, well, you know what, I have realized that I can work somewhere else in a better place with more life than here. So yes, we also have recently a doctor in one of the cities that he's an intern. He's doing an internship in this abortion center. And he first thought we were protesters.
Protesting, yeah.
We were protesting, but for him was strange to see our peaceful manners. Finally, we had a coffee with him. The leader was really scared. They have been talking, and now he, that is not non-believer, he's approaching little by little to God now. We are praying a lot for him. And also, even the nurse of that same abortion center had a peaceful dialogue that could really understand our position and why. I think for them it's really hard to understand why we are there. Because, well, at the end they are getting paid, and they might have a purpose. Some of them might have sometimes even noble. Some of them think that they are helping women.
Yeah.
But they don't really understand why we are there if nobody pays us nothing. And little by little they understand that it's an act of love.
And I think what you've said there is very important at the end. You said little by little. A lot of these things can take a long period of time and require a lot of perseverance, can't they? Is that something that you found quite a challenge at all in your pro-life work? You know, those qualities of having to really be patient, to persevere, because results aren't always instantaneous, aren't they? It's not like you go outside and suddenly everyone comes, flocking out saying, I've changed my mind. It can require quite a long, hard slog.
Yeah, absolutely. I think perseverance is one of the most challenging things as a volunteer and as a leader. So, but I think precisely the 40 days, it's an excellent opportunity to build perseverance because indeed we are living in a society that is used to, for example, the Amazon effect, like I want this, I want it now, and it comes to me now or tomorrow. No, we are used to that, and the new generations even more. We are not used to wait. So this is a wonderful experience of trusting in God, which means actually many times, well, you will never see a direct effect on what you're doing because it's a prayer, it's indirect by itself, it's God who acts, which means that you learn to rely less in your own strength, in your own forces, in your own activities, and more in God, because He's really the person who makes everything. And also, it is really common, especially in volunteers, well, also in some leaders that they get tired as well, but in volunteers, they are sometimes used to, well, especially in Spain right now, we have too many noise from the media, from, I don't know, political deceit, from so many problems that are actually there that create anger in people or distraction on many other things. And some people say, well, for example, this campaign, well, the pro-life or the 40 days is not new anymore, so now I'm going to get focused in these other things and this other thing. So Yes, it's a training for perseverance, because at the end, if you stop going to your prayer hour, nobody's going to do it for you. Your prayer is not going to be replaced by anybody else. So if you stop doing that, never forget that those babies are being killed every day, with or without you. So we cannot forget our commitment on that prayer, because God can't really end with abortion, but for that He always requests a bit of effort from our side.
Yeah, I think that kind of personal nature of it is something that I think 40 Days really helps us to realise, because it's a campaign that anybody can get involved in some way, can't we? And it's not something that we can just say, I'll pay you and you go and do it. You know, it's a case of like us all accepting our own part in that. And I just want to ask you something as well, Nayeli, about, and I know we've talked a little bit about, obviously abortion affecting, clearly children are killed through abortion, and it can affect healthcare workers. Obviously, you've touched on women, but what about men? Through the work that you've done, have you ever seen men being affected by abortion in any way? Is there anything that you could talk into, any personal encounters?
Yes, it is true that it's not the common thing to see, but we have seen it in many ways. In the last campaign, for example, and this is the only experience I've directly saw with my own eyes, was a man. I met a man that arrived with his car and asked me, for how long have we been praying? Well, and I explained him a bit, and he told me that from time to time he comes over in front of that abortion center, because 13 years ago he attended there to abort to her girl. And there was a man there at the time. I don't know what he was doing. We have no idea who might be 30 years ago, but he had a banner, and he touched his shoulder, and he asked him not to do it. Please don't do it. And in the words of this man, he told me, at that time I was blinded by the demon, and just with that presence of that man, with those words, I realized what I was about to do, and I decided not to do so. And now I'm super happy with my daughter. And I pass here from time to time trying to find that man to just tell him thank you. So
praise God, that's a beautiful story. Yeah.
Yes.
And the fact that he must be so grateful to keep coming back 13 years later to try and find that man. And in a way, sometimes it's good that he doesn't see that man, because in a way, anyone who prays there is that person in effect. They're all doing something that is just as helpful as that man on that day. But it reminds you of that individual responsibility, doesn't it? Like you were just saying, if that one man had decided on that day, you know what, I'm going to have a lie-in today, or you know what, I don't feel like it's really for me anymore, then that 13-year-old child that he had wouldn't be here. So that's beautiful. So the other aspects of the campaign, Nayeli, is we've talked about the prayer, but obviously the public witness is himself an aspect, and the fasting. Why is that an important part of this campaign?
Well, the public presence, first of all, because we expect everybody already has a prayer life, or they pray at the parish or chapel. But it is true that also remembering the what I said before, that abortion touches many people, being there, it's also an opportunity, a chance for God to reach those people that probably in other circumstances will never touch a church or enter a church. So that's the main reason, and giving that testimony. And for fasting, we encourage our volunteers to do fasting, and it's something that is not trendy at all. Even when I started, I have never fasted in my life. I had no idea how to do it, and I know that there's a lot of ignorance about it. So we try to do that pedagogical work also among our volunteers. And the reason is, basically because the Bible says some demons can only be expelled through prayer and fasting. And we know that fasting somehow, we are just in these first world countries, we are just used to commodities, to being comfortable, to having everything. we are not used to having need. So this way, we are actually consciously renouncing to that to orient our spirit more towards God, because it's too easy sometimes to lose empathy when you have everything. And well, this way I also try to explain, because I read it from a bishop that is pretty popular in Spain, that is Monsignor Munilla. He explains that there are like three parts of three legs of a table: prayer, fasting, and charity. No, the recommendation we have in the Holy Week and Lent. You cannot do one without the other. So if you just do fasting without the others, it's just following a strict diet or something like that. So if you do fasting that day, you must do more prayer that day. If you can align it with your presence in the 40 days campaign, you have the perfect pack for them.
Yeah, and I know also, I've heard quite a lot of people, whenever fasting is brought up, they'll always think about other means of fasting. They'll say you can fast from social media, you can fast from television. And these things are true and are good to do because they require, self-mastery. It requires a certain amount of penance. But I do think there's something very unique and special about fasting from food. That's something that affects us physically in a way that kind of fasting from other external things doesn't. And sometimes I think that's why I sometimes kind of look for other things to fast from, because I know that fasting from food is that particular challenge that you kind of you can't find something else to replace it. You can think, oh, okay, I won't look at social media, I'll read a book instead. But if you've renounced food, well, in a way, you're still going to feel that hunger, and nothing quite fills it up. So I think that's a really good thing to fast from that perspective, because you really kind of feel the effects of it, and it makes you kind of think about, why am I doing this? And like you say, maybe have some solidarity as well with others who don't have the luxuries that many of us in the countries that we live in do have to hand at any time.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, well, it's pretty convenient, I think, to try to find another ways of fasting that doesn't require. I mean, it's of course a sacrifice to stop watching social media, but at the end that gives you, well, more the attachment and freedom, for sure. It's a good thing, but it's a benefit just for you. Whereas you renounce to food, it's something that actually makes no sense from the human perspective. Why should I renounce to food? It's a basic need. But at the end, it's something that God asks from us. And it really requires a sacrifice from us, because we give it for granted, while in other parts of the world they don't have it.
So beginning to kind of bring this to an end then, Nayeli, what other kind of challenges are there in Spain that you're facing at the moment? Are there any other kind of, from the pro-life perspective, any other big hurdles that there are there, or difficulties in your pro-life work?
Yes, we have government prosecution. Not exactly the way you have it in the UK with the buffer zones or in other countries like Germany, but a couple of years, 3 years already ago, there was a law that was approved by the current government that tried to prosecute pro-lifers. So even though they didn't establish a buffer zone or a specific distance, they were prosecuting pro-life presence somehow. It was a super ambiguous law, and everybody was scared about that, but the result was probably the contrary that they were expecting, and is that from one campaign to another, we got the double of the campaigns, just like that.
Wow.
So actually, every time we have that prosecution, because for me it's super clear that sometimes our government has more faith than us, because they can see directly. I mean, the pro-life movement have existed from the 80s, from the very beginning of the decriminalization of the pro-life. Why they have just now created a law like that? Well, because they actually see the results of prayer. And so we cannot forget that it actually works, even more than what our eyes can directly see. So they have prosecuted us that way. We have some cities with harassment from the police, some others that they actually realize that that we are the good ones and they don't do nothing. And because of this law, we have some trials pending in some of the tougher cities. But for that, we have created a team of lawyers that can protect our volunteers, because at the end, our role as leaders is to grant that protection for our volunteers. But it is true that it is also key to ask from all Christians to be brave in these situations, because if you renounce to that, well, you are a clear testimony of that. If you renounce to such a basic right as praying in the street, like, well, it's not even a right. I mean, it's something that is must be out of question. It's your personal relationship with God. You can start renouncing to anything. Mm-hmm. So we have that, but yes, as I have said, every time the government or in the social media they have attacked us, the result have always been a duplication of volunteers or campaigns.
Yeah, it's a good reminder, isn't it, that what it says in the Bible, it's always true that what is meant for evil, it's actually brought about even a greater good. And so that's certainly a sign for hope. Any other signs of hope to kind of end on, Nayeli, that you can see either in the pro-life movement in general or in your own personal movement in Spain?
Mm-hmm. As I have said, in these 5 years, I have seen the society started to transform. There are other initiatives that are not necessarily pro-life that have been inspired by the 40 Days campaign, and they have told me. So I have seen also many young people awaken a specific vocation into the pro-life, and they have joined other organizations or they have started new initiatives by themselves. So I think it's a great opportunity to awake the consciousness and yes, to realize that prayer is the base of everything. Mm-hmm. There is also a nice testimonial that I try to remember every time I find a non-believer person, for example, that thinks, well, I'm Catholic, but I pray in my parish, and I know that you must do more than prayer, as if this was not more than prayer, but they usually say that. This was a woman that in Madrid, an old woman that she hates praying in the 40 Days campaign. And one day she decided to participate, thinking, well, actually this doesn't work for anything, it's useless. And that very same day, we had a mother saved that she could see with her own eyes. And the following campaign, she had exactly the same debate, even though she had faced that situation, that testimonial. And well, she decided to go one day by saying, well, this is the last time that I come here, this doesn't work, and so on. And that same day, she also saw another mother being saved. So, well, it is crazy how God chooses the ways. But at the end, what we are sure in the 40 days is that Christ has resurrected, that He is alive, and just for that reason, we know that He will end abortion. So as Christians, we are not allowed to lose hope. We must persevere and be humble with whatever God decides to show us.
Oh, well, just talking to you, Nayeli, gives me so much hope for the pro-life movement, and so much of what you've said about Spain really resonates with the pro-life movement here in England. I can see so many parallels. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. And I really hope that all the pro-life movement in Spain is encouraged by the witness that you have. And thank you so much for that witness, Nayeli.
Thank you, Isabel. It's been a pleasure.